I think this is hilarious, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, you may not think it is as hilarious as I do, but let me know in the comments. It is an AI-generated podcast of one of my videos. Now, it's produced by an AI from Google called Notebook LM. I shall leave a link to that in the description if you want to mess about with it. Its main function is to summarize documents. So if you have a 50-page report that you need to know the contents of but don't want to read, feed it into this and it'll give you a summary. It can also read YouTube videos, or at least it interprets the spoken words part of it. It doesn't understand what's going on in the video, which is possibly why some of the things it comes up with seem a little bit strange and peculiar and funny. It also, I think, sort of spoofs the podcast format, or at least its own podcast format, which is a little bit OTT and slightly enthusiastic, if you like, but because it can't see what's going on screen, which you obviously need for tutorial videos, some of the things it comes up with are slightly out of step, out of joint, slightly peculiar. Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you because as I say, I thought it was funny and interesting. My original idea when I heard about this podcast thing, was to see if it could actually produce tutorial podcasts, just audio podcasts of some of the tutorials I've been doing. I thought that would be useful so you could listen to it in the car without having to sit in front of a screen. But it didn't really do that. So I found it this one about the Krell, which I thought might be interesting, and I certainly think it is. Anyway, I shall play the video. It actually almost gets my name correct. I'm going to stick myself in the corner, but I'm going to mute my audio. But you'll be able to see my reaction to the things it comes out with. Let's have a listen.
All right, diving into Krell music composition today.
Ooh, yeah, getting into some alien sounds.
Exactly, and it's not every day you get to explore music from a civilization so advanced that they vanish without a trace, you know?
Yeah, it's like their music is the only clue we have.
Yeah, and from that classic sci-fi film, Forbidden Planet.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah, Forbidden Planet, that's a classic.
It's a 1956 film about a starship crew that lands on this mysterious planet, and they only find these traces of this civilization, the Krell, but we never actually see them.
Right, just their creations and this amazing music.
Right, it's their music that gives us this window into their world.
Yeah.
And speaking of that music, before we get into actually making our own, we should probably clear up what exactly is considered Krell music.
Right.
Because there's the original score from the film, and then there's this whole other concept of Krell patches that came way later.
Yeah, this came much later.
So
it can be a little confusing.
Yeah, it can get a little bit confusing.
Sure.
So let's just start with, what do we consider the true Krell music?
So the music from Forbidden Planet, that's what we'll call the true Krell music.
Okay.
It was composed by Louis and Bebe Barron.
Wow.
Years before synthesizers even existed, and it was their interpretation of what they thought the Krell might sound like.
That's wild.
You can actually hear it for yourself. The links are in the show notes. Go check that out.
I will definitely checking that out.
Yeah, it's really something else.
It's amazing what they did,
Totally.
All those homemade electronic gadgets and tape manipulation to get those sounds back then.
It really is incredible, isn't it?
It is. But then much later, like in 2012,
Mm-hmm.
a musician named Todd Barton created a Krell patch on the Buchla easel synthesizer.
Yes. Yeah.
And this wasn't about recreating specific pieces from the film.
No.
It was more about capturing that essence of the Krell sound.
Yeah, the vibe.
The vibe, and the key difference here is that Krell patches are generative.
Right. Generative.
They create these continuously evolving soundscapes.
Exactly.
So how is that? How is that different? Or how would you even,
Yeah, so it's like setting up a system of rules on your synthesizer
Okay.
that generates this constantly changing sonic environment.
Okay.
Like, think of Brian Eno, his concept of generative music. It's very similar to that.
So almost like setting up a system that just kind of goes and creates this.
Right. It just keeps going.
Okay.
And you get this.
So that's different from the original Krell music, which was intentionally composed.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have Krell patches are generative systems, but Krell music is actually composed.
Yes, that's the distinction.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and there's actually a YouTube expert named Ian Waugh who has this really great breakdown of how to compose your own Krell music
Oh, cool.
using any synthesizer.
Okay.
It's very cool. You should check it out.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of how to create some of this Krell music.
All right, let's do it.
So Waz starts by analyzing the original score from Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, he takes a deep dive into that.
And he points out that it's atonal, which means it doesn't follow the traditional Western scales and harmonies.
Right, it's outside of those typical structures.
Plus, it lacks a standard musical form. There's no verse, chorus, bridge.
It's very unique in that way.
So how is he even going about creating his own music with this kind of approach?
Right, well, the Barons, even though they didn't use traditional structures, they
Yeah.
still created these really distinct segments of sound.
Okay.
Using drones, sweeps, and even what sounds like a rhythmic footstep pattern.
Oh, wow.
So it's not about scales and chords, it's more like building with blocks of sound.
That's interesting. So you're not working within like the same kind of musical framework as you would with...
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a different approach.
So Waz starts with creating a sound palette.
Yeah, he explores different synthesizers, picking sounds that he thinks fit that Krell vibe.
Oh, cool.
You know, evolving drones, sweeps, spacey textures, and at least one percussive sound to mimic those footsteps from the original score.
I like it. So you don't need any fancy, expensive setup to get started.
No, not at all. Any synthesizer can work.
That's great.
Yeah, as long as you can create those essential building blocks.
Okay, so what are some examples of the sounds he uses?
Well, he suggests using a deep resonant drone, for example,
Okay.
to kind of represent the Krell's advanced technology,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe layering on these shimmering, almost metallic sweeps
Ooh.
to hint at their vast, unknown world.
I like it. I can already picture it.
Yeah, and he even uses color coding for different types of sounds,
Really?
like red for pads and drones to show how they're arranged visually.
Oh, wow.
It's like a sonic map.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a really neat way to visualize the composition.
But without those, familiar musical structures, how does he create a sense of like cohesion in the music?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, he actually says music does benefit, I think, certainly our ears from repetition.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's right, even without a traditional beat or melody, repetition can create that sense of rhythm and anticipation.
Yeah, it's like it can drive the music forward.
Exactly.
So it's not just about recreating the sounds from Forbidden Planet note for note.
No, not at all.
Okay, there's room for your own interpretation.
Absolutely. Wah actually encourages experimentation.
Okay.
He even specifically mentions adding things like filter sweeps and buzzy sounds and square wave textures.
Oh, cool.
So he's really saying, don't be afraid to get a little weird with it.
Yeah, make it your own.
Exactly. Find your own voice within this Krell sound world.
So it's more about capturing the spirit of the Krell.
Yes.
Not just like copying the notes.
Exactly.
We're given this like sonic starting point.
Right, a foundation.
And we could explore and evolve and create something unique.
I love that. It's like being handed a set of tools and then being set loose in a sonic sandbox.
Yeah, exactly.
To create our own interpretations of what Krell music could be.
That's awesome.
It really is.
This is already blowing my mind a little bit.
I know. It's a lot to take in, but it's so much fun to think about all the possibilities.
But before we get too carried away with all that,
Yeah.
let's just take a minute and consider something that I find really intriguing.
Okay.
What does this whole fascination with these alien sounds tell us about ourselves?
Ooh, that's a deep one.
I think it speaks to our curiosity about the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
about other forms of intelligence out there in the universe.
It's like we're trying to connect with something beyond our comprehension.
Exactly, and using music to do it.
It's a powerful rule.
Yeah.
Music is a universal language, after all.
Now, I'm curious, you've delved into music theory and history. Do you see any parallels between this fascination with Krell music and the evolution of human music?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me more.
Well, think about how, even in our own history, composers have used music to evoke images and feelings,
Mhm.
like how classical composers used music to depict nature,
Right.
or create a sense of awe and wonder.
Or how electronic music pioneers created entirely new sounds with synthesizers.
Exactly, they were pushing boundaries, just like we're doing with Krell music.
So it's like this constant exploration of the sonic unknown,
Precisely.
whether it's inspired by the natural world
Yeah.
or by fictional alien civilizations.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. It really adds another dimension to this whole thing.
It makes you think.
It does. But let's get back to the practical side of composing this Krell music.
All right, back to the music.
We've got our sound palette. We understand this kind of unconventional approach.
Mm-hmm.
And we know repetition is key.
Right.
But how do we actually arrange these sounds to create a piece of music?
Well, Wah offers some helpful guidelines in his video, but the beauty of this is that there's no one right way to do it.
So we're essentially given the tools
Yes,
and then set loose to create our own interpretation.
exactly. It's all about tapping into your own creativity.
But before you run off to your synthesizers,
Yeah.
I want to point out one of the most interesting things that Wah does in his video.
Oh, what's that?
He actually shows us visually how he arranges his sounds.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's like a blueprint for Krell music.
It is. He lays it all out visually so you can see how the different elements interact.
Okay, I'm really curious to see how that works in practice.
Me too. Let's dive into the specifics of his process.
Awesome, let's do it. Okay, so let's talk about this visual arrangement technique that he uses. It's kind of like a blueprint for Krell music.
Yeah, it is. It's like imagine a timeline
Okay.
that represents his composition, and he marks out these sections for different sound elements using those color codes we talked about.
Right.
So like a long red block
Okay.
that might represent a deep evolving drone
Okay.
that runs through a whole section.
Got it. So that's like our foundation.
Yeah, you could think of it like
The
that.
Krell equivalent of a bash line.
Exactly. And then on top of that, he might add shorter blue blocks,
Okay.
representing those shimmering metallic sweeps.
Ooh.
And these could come in and out, creating a sense of movement and space.
I'm picturing like spacecraft
Yeah.
guiding through the vastness of space.
Exactly.
Very cool.
And then maybe he'll add some tiny yellow dots
Okay.
to represent those percussive footstep sounds.
Okay.
And those could be scattered throughout,
Good.
creating a subtle rhythmic pulse.
So it's almost like he's choreographing these different sounds.
Yeah.
Like a dance,
That's a great way to put it.
rather than composing in a traditional sense.
Yeah, it's a very different way of thinking about music.
And what's interesting is he uses repetition within this arrangement.
Right. He might repeat a particular pattern
Okay.
of sweeps or footsteps
Mm-hmm.
to create a sense of structure and familiarity.
That makes sense because without traditional melodies or chord progressions,
Yeah.
repetition becomes even more crucial.
Exactly. It helps to tie everything
To
together.
create a cohesive piece of music.
Right. And remember how Wall encourages experimentation?
Oh, yeah.
He specifically mentions adding those filter sweeps.
Right, and the buzzy sounds,
Yeah.
even the square wave textures.
Yeah, he's basically saying don't be afraid to get weird with it.
Make it your own.
Exactly. And he even suggests thinking about the specific emotions or stories you want to convey
Okay.
through your Krell music.
Oh, wow.
So, like, what kind of sonic world are you trying to create?
That's cool.
What feelings do you want to evoke in the listener?
That's such a cool concept.
It is. It's like we're not just making music, we're crafting entire sonic universes
Yeah.
inspired by this lost civilization.
It almost feels like we're archaeologists.
Yes.
Like uncovering fragments of a forgotten language
I love that, Nick.
and using them to tell new stories.
It's really beautiful when you think about it that way.
It is. It's very cool. But I can't help but wonder, as we're going through all this, what would the Krell themselves think about all this?
Oh, man, that's the question, isn't it?
What would they think of our little interpretations of their sound?
Who knows? Maybe they'd be amazed by our ingenuity.
Maybe.
Maybe they'd find it utterly bizarre.
I mean, we're just humans trying to understand this advanced alien civilization.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It is.
To think that maybe somewhere out there,
Yeah.
a Krell civilization might be listening to our music.
And just like scratching their heads.
Right, or maybe tapping their equivalent of feet to the rhythm.
That's awesome. But, let's bring it back down to earth for a second.
Okay.
Why should the listener care about any of this?
Oh, that's a great question.
What's in it for them?
Well, I think on a basic level,
Yeah.
it's just a fun creative exercise.
It is.
It's a chance to push your musical boundaries,
Right.
experiment with sound in ways you might never have considered before.
But I think it goes a little deeper than that.
I agree.
There's something almost meditative about it.
Yeah.
You're tapping into this ancient cosmic energy and channeling it through your own creativity.
Exactly. And in a world that's so full of noise and distractions, it can be a way to just disconnect
Yeah.
and connect with something truly unique and inspiring.
Like creating your own sonic escape pod.
I love that.
Launching yourself into a universe of pure sound and imagination.
That's beautiful.
But let's get practical for a second.
Oh,
For someone who's never done anything like this before,
yeah.
where do they even begin?
Well, that's where Ian Watt's video comes in handy.
Okay.
He breaks it down step by step.
Yeah,
So anyone can follow along.
that's great. And you don't need any fancy equipment
Nope,
or years of music theory training.
not at all.
Just a synthesizer,
Yeah.
a curious mind,
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to experiment.
And who knows, you might just discover a hidden talent for composing music that's truly out of this world.
I love it. But before you all go running off to become the next generation of Krell composers,
Right.
we've got one final challenge for you.
Oh, yes, the challenge.
We want you to think about your own personal take on Krell music.
Yeah.
If you were to create a piece inspired by this lost civilization,
Mm-hmm.
what emotions or stories would you try to convey?
What sonic textures would you choose?
to evoke this feeling of a technologically advanced
Right.
but ultimately vanished alien world.
Let us know.
Yeah, share your thoughts, share any insights you have.
Or even links to your own Krell music creations.
We would love to hear them.
We're excited to see what you come up with.
And remember, you can find links to the original Krell music from Forbidden Planet and Ian Waugh's full video in the show notes.
Definitely check those out.
Until next time.
Yes.
Keep exploring.
Keep creating.
And keep diving deep. I feel like we've really gone deep on Krell music.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We have.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. Exploring music and imagination.
Yeah, and all these mysteries of the universe.
And I really hope this has sparked something in you listening.
Yeah, I hope it does.
Just some bits of that they were just fantastic. I mean, I absolutely loved it. Funny. It talks about notes in the show reel or whatever it is. Any links which are referred to, you can find them in the original video, which of course I'll link to in the description. That's it. Let me know what you think. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I will see you with something perhaps not so weird in the next one. Bye for now.